Before we move to the agenda, there are a number of procedure points I wish to run through. In addition, I will clarify various housekeeping issues. Today's meeting is being held using Microsoft Teams, and this is the first Council virtual PNR meeting being held under virtual meetings regulations. All decisions made today by the PNR committee will have the same standing and validity equal to decisions made at a standard PNR meeting held at the Town Hall. Today's meeting is being streamed live on the internet, and a recorded version will be on the Council's website within 48 hours. Members of the public who have submitted written statements under Agenda Item 1, as Chairman, I can confirm that your statements have been circulated to all PNR members prior to the meeting. Also, the statements have been published on the Council's website and will be considered when relevant decisions are taken. Under Agenda Item 1, your statements will be read out by officers for the benefit of everyone watching this public meeting. Following guidance from the National Planning Advisory Service on how to run committees during the current pandemic, senior councillors from all parties, in consultation with the Chief Executive, have agreed to reduce the membership of the committee to 13 for virtual meetings for a temporary period. Political balance applies, and the 13 members at today's meeting are as follows: Andy Cole, Chairman; John Leigh Morgan, Vice Chairman; Peter Bryant; Caroline Cherry; Peter Crew; Ian Connolly; Anne Harley; Robert Payne; Mike Solomon; Richard Westwood; Steve Hogg; Paul Gardner, and Karen Harrison. In addition to the 13, we have the following officers attending the meeting: Richard Kent, Head of Planning; Roger Wilmot and Simon Exley, Planning Service Managers; James Wigmore, Lead Transport Planner; Sue Buck, Solicitor; and Democratic and Electoral Officers Michelle Chesterman and Hazel Brinton. Only the above members I have named may vote on any agenda item. Councillors, please abide by the meeting etiquette emailed to you regarding using Teams. Remember to use your headphones, as this will improve sound quality. Make sure your audio is muted when you are not speaking, and when you have spoken, mute your audio again. When you wish to speak, please indicate using the chat function. Simply use the word chat. Simply use the word speak. Do not use hand signals. I will invite you to speak by the way of a queue system. If you are leaving or returning to the meeting at any point, please ensure I am made aware of this by requesting to speak. This is very important in respect of any disclosure of pecuniary interest, where you are not permitted to take part in the agenda by law. A Democratic Services Officer will confirm when you have left the meeting and contact you again after the agenda item is completed or determined. Please make sure all your mobiles are switched off. Voting. When proposing a motion, please indicate via the chat function and wait until I invite you to speak. Please clearly state what you are moving. For example, the recommendation in the report. This is very important in regard to the public following the planning process. If you are seconding a motion, again, clearly indicate via the chat function and wait until I invite you to speak. Voting on applications will be by roll call. The legal officer will call each councillor in turn in alphabetical order. The vote will be taken on the basis that you have heard the full debate on the application. Please state clearly if your vote is for the motion or against the motion, or you wish to abstain. This will ensure that the vote is correctly recorded and enable members of the public to properly observe the vote. At the Chairman's discretion, voting on procedural matters, such as confirmation of the minutes, will be done in reverse order and en bloc. The Chairman will ask for votes against the motion, then for abstentions via chats, then all remaining voting members in the meeting will be taken en bloc as voting for the motion. Before I move to the agenda, are there any questions from councillors? Michelle?
Nothing here, Chairman.
Okay, so we move to the agenda. Agenda item 1, public speaking as amended by Standing Order 5A. Written submissions received by the public. And for today's meeting, we have 3 submissions. Our first submission is from Mr. Tannehill, who is in support of the application at Banwell for 54 dwellings. And the submission will be read out by Hazel Brinton.
Thank you for the opportunity to make this statement in support of the proposals at Wolvershill Road, Banwell. My name is Simon Tannehill and I am the Land and Planning Director at Strongbox Homes. We are an award-winning private housing developer based in Taunton that work across the southwest to deliver high-quality housing. We do not roll out one-size-fits-all developments and are proud of what we achieve. We are currently building and selling on a number of developments in North Somerset, and these include 38 homes at Congsbury, 118 homes at Sandford, and 49 houses and apartments at Westwick. These developments offer a range of family homes, including affordable properties, and our sites are designed to be sympathetic to their surroundings, with homes displaying character and individuality. We have worked with officers and the local community on this project for over 2 years, including entering into formal pre-application discussion with the council, as well as public consultation. We have significantly amended the development since its submission, working to find solutions, and in doing so have reduced the amount of development we are seeking on this site from 63 homes to 54 homes. We are delighted the application is before you today with a recommendation for approval. I note that the chief concerns of the local community understandably focus on the traffic situation in the centre of Banwell. I can assure you that this has been explored in great deal with your highway officers. As set out by your officers, an appeal decision for 150 dwellings, while dismissed, established that such a scope of development would not warrant refusal on transport grounds. We welcome the officers' conclusions that the scheme will not have a material impact upon the village centre's traffic situation. We have worked extensively with officers to address concerns over protected species, having added much larger buffer areas, new hedgerows and tree planting, while agreeing a lighting strategy response with your highway officers and Natural England. This scheme is an exemplary response to ecology considerations, with many multiples in excess of the DEFRA replacement habitat calculations. This represents an approach that should be welcomed. Again, we have worked with the LLFA and your officers to demonstrate an acceptable drainage solution. We have also worked with your landscape officer to ensure that our proposals will maintain an appropriate relationship with the properties to the south by increasing property setbacks and changing the form of these properties to bungalows. The proposals display a low density form appropriate to this part of the village. While we appreciate that such development evokes strong concern from local communities, we have worked hard to ensure that the impacts of development are comprehensively addressed, clearly evidenced through various technical responses that we have received, demonstrating that there are no outstanding concerns and concluding that the proposals are acceptable. We fully support the officer recommendation and respectfully request that the development be granted planning permission. The end of statement, Chairman.
Thank you. The next submission is from Steve Price, who is against the proposal for a 2-storey side extension and porch at Cinderford Cottage, Rington. And the submission will be read out by Richard Kent.
Richard Westwood
is now joining.
Thank you, Chairman. I, Steve Price, am making this statement on behalf of myself and 3 other residents. We strongly object to the planning application for the extension at Cinderford Cottage. We are not against development as long as it is in keeping and respectful of the character of the surrounding properties. This extension would have a massive impact on the surrounding properties. With regard to Swallow Barn, this is now faced with looking at a 7-metre high and 7.6 metre long characterless facade that comes within less than a metre of the boundary wall, It obscures sunlight, amenity, and creates a tunneling effect. Also, as the extension is 2 stories high, it will completely obscure any amenity, sunlight, and far-reaching views of the Mendips from the only garden of the neighbouring property, Greystones. It would greatly affect the view when walking down the ancient bridleway next to the Grade 2 listed property, Roper's Lodge, and would significantly alter the aspects from Roper's Lane. We have suggested to the applicant that a single-storey extension would be much more in keeping with the property and would have a reduced impact on the neighbouring properties. However, they are unwilling to compromise. We are very concerned that the report from the planning officer is factually incorrect and misleading. This has been outlined in the document which has been sent to the P&R committee. We are reasonable people, but feel very strongly that we are not being listened to and would request that the planning committee visit the site to gain a clear understanding of the effect this extension will have on the surrounding properties. We are disappointed that the applicant has already recently built a large detached house, family house, within the grounds of Cinderford Cottage, and seems intent on filling in every available space around their property with no regard to the impact on neighbouring properties and with no consideration of fellow residents. We strongly urge the Planning and Regulations Committee to reject this application and encourage the applicant to consider reapplying to build a single-storey extension. Thank you.
Thank you. The last submission is from Helen Gwinnett, who is in support of the proposal at Cinderford Cottage, Warrington. And the submission will be read out by Michelle Chesterman.
My name is Helen Gwinnett and I am the applicant. I've owned Cinderford Cottage for over 30 years. The rationale for this project was to sensibly extend my cottage to make it more suitable for occupation in later life. The current stairs are extremely steep at 48 degrees and awkward due to the half landing and restricted head height. The ground floor living accommodation is on 2 levels and the laundry and utility room are in a separate 1950s outbuilding accessed by 2 steep steps and crossing a yard. Benefits for me are mainly from an accessibility perspective in that it simplifies and opens up the ground floor to provide better circulation space, provides a utility room within the cottage, provides a wider and shallower pitched staircase with full head height above, provides an ensuite bathroom in the main bedroom, and very importantly, provides level first floor accommodation. The proposed improvements will still allow the retention of a good-sized cottage garden and off-street parking for 2 cars. This scheme has evolved from the original architect design with input from the neighbours, the planning officer and the conservation officer. As a consequence, the scheme fully complies with North Somerset Council's residential design guide. We do not believe that it creates any overlooking issues, nor does it have an overbearing impact on the adjacent properties. To develop this scheme, the architect has worked tirelessly with the local authority. I believe that a sensitive scheme has been developed, which not only respects the existing property with a subservient extension, but also will make the property inclusive for myself and future occupiers. In summary, the proposal fully complies with the planning policy, is supported by the planning officer, the conservation officer and Rington Parish Council, who have all recommended approval. On this basis, it is hoped that the application can be supported by this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, apologies for absence. Michelle.
The Head of Legal and Democratic Services has received notification that Councillor Havison is substituting for Councillor Stuart McQuillan. There are 11 members currently present, who are Councillor Caroline Cherry, Councillor Andy Cole, Peter Crew, Kieran Connolly, Paul Gardner, Karen Havison, Steve Hogg, John Leigh Morgan, Robert Payne, Mike Solomon and Richard Westwood, and apologies will be noted from the remaining members of the committee.
Thank you. Item 4, minutes of 18th of March 2020 to approve as a correct record. Any comments before the vote is taken via chats?
Councillor Gardner would like to speak, Chair.
Just a question, and Andy, have we heard, or Richard, have we heard anything from Bristol Airport? Are they appealing at all? Do we know?
Richard?
Chairman, no appeal has been lodged yet. There is still some time for the period for appeal to have been lodged, and as soon as we hear whether an appeal is lodged, we'll of course let members know.
Thank you. Hazel, any other comments?
No further comments, Chairman.
In which case, are there any members voting against the motion? And this is via chats.
No members voting against.
Are there any members wishing to abstain?
Councillor Payne abstaining on minutes. No other members abstaining.
Okay. In which case, en bloc, all remaining members support the motion and the minutes are carried. Thank you. Item 5, matters referred by Council, the Executive, other committees. There are none. Item 6, planning application 18/P/4735/OUT, outline planning application for up to 54 dwellings, including 16 affordable housing units, together with access at Wolvershill Park, Banwell. Roger Wilmot.
Thank you, Chairman. As you'll see on the first slide, this is an application at Wolvershill Road. It's north of existing dwellings at Wolvershill Park and Nightcott Park at Banwell. Could we move to the next slide, please? Just by way of indication of the location is defined by the red block in the centre of this plan. It includes an area, a narrow area to the east of Wolvershill Road, which you'll see as a narrow strip, which relates to particular drainage aspects of this development. By way of just identifying it, the blue line that runs from top to bottom of your screen is the M5, and the yellow road which it straddles is Wolvershill Road itself. Maroon road that runs from left to right across the screen is the A371 leading from Weston to, on the left hand side, through to the main junction in the centre of the village of the A368 and the A371 at the bottom of Castle Hill and at the junction with East Street. Okay, if we could move on to the next slide, please. The applicants have submitted a number of indicative plans showing how a development of 54 dwellings can be carried out satisfactorily on this site. You'll see again the red outline of the main body of the site where development is proposed. That's enclosed by the red lines on your screen. And the indicative plan shows a T-junction with Wolvershill Road on the right-hand side of the screen, and takes a central access road into the site with several small cul-de-sacs branching off to the north. Through the centre of the site, there is a significant constraint in terms of the layout, which is the presence of a fairly large pipeline, water pipeline that runs underneath there, and it's very likely that this would dictate a layout ultimately when it is approved when it comes to reserved matters. As far as the indicative plan is concerned, you'll see it has dictated that in effect there is, through the centre of the site, a number of areas of quite sizable green space, which I think probably would aid the character of the ultimate layout on the site. To the right-hand side, you'll see there is a fairly large area of open space adjacent to Wolvers Hill Road, which at this point is a fairly sort of leafy character. And what's on the frontage of the site is proposed to be green open space with 2 attenuation ponds and additional planting. And then to the top edge of the site, running along the top edge, is a 10-metre wide margin for ecological protection purposes. It's the bat flight corridors. Down the left-hand side, there is a 6-metre corridor, which reflects again the existing vegetation on that boundary. And then on the southern boundary, adjacent to Wolvers Hill Park, which is the cul-de-sac with a number of existing, that's characterised by a fairly large number of existing bungalows, which also leads through to Nightcott Park, which similarly has a predominance of bungalows there. So there is a 10-metre margin for ecological purposes that's been shown on the southern boundary, but this also has a dual function of effectively providing separation distances between the proposed dwellings and those existing ones. You can move to the next slide, please. Won't necessarily dwell on this one for too long. It's an illustrative landscape strategy for the site, and perhaps shows a little bit more clearly the green buffer margins around the periphery of the site, those principally for ecological purposes. Also running from north to south, or from top to bottom on the site, there is an existing hedgerow with effectively a margin either side of that to allow that to continue to function as a corridor. Again, I think it's visible perhaps better from this particular diagram, but this indicative plan also shows the amount of green space through the centre of the site, some of which would fall probably within individual plots, but there is one part where the main access road kinks towards the bottom of the page. In front of that, the developer has indicated the potential for providing a play area at that location. And again, there is further planting which has been indicated along the southern boundary to provide additional assistance in creating separation between existing and proposed dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you.
On this particular diagram, this is one to do with proposed building heights. Again, an indication of how could be developed. It's not necessarily how it will be. That will ultimately be determined at any reserved matter state approved. We have reflected some principal points in this within one of the conditions, which require that a minimum of 6 of the properties along the southern boundary be a single-storey construction. And just to illustrate that point, the brownish yellow plots which are shown on here are indicated on this plan as single-storey. The blue ones are 2-storey, but as you'll see, the applicant has indicated that it would be possible to maintain suitable separation distances by either moving those further away from the boundary or turning them round so that they have gable ends only facing to the bottom of the page to the existing dwellings. And the slightly sort of mauvey grey blocks that are on there are single-storey garages associated with each of those units. And again, as you'll see from this particular plan, there is that additional landscaping on the southern boundary shown. Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, this diagram relates, we were very, very mindful in dealing with this application of the well-documented issues and concerns expressed in connection with this application about traffic generation and the potential effects on congestion in the centre of Banwell village where the two A roads meet. This diagram shows within the red line, it's referred to in the officer's report as the Banwell cordon, and in essence this diagram shows which roads fall within that cordon, and over a period, I can't recall, it does say in the report the number of years that it's been measured over, but in essence in that period the traffic levels in the centre of Banwell on these roads have actually fallen, whereas in the remainder of the North Somerset network they have risen by some 18%, and that is a critical point because this was a matter we discussed at some considerable length over the impact of this development, and I think there is a conclusion that has been drawn previously, which is that Banwell has become such a known difficult spot for traffic congestion that it tends to have a degree of self-regulation, that people tend to avoid it, and I think the conclusion was reached that the limited amount of traffic in any case that the proposed development would generate would add very little in terms of congestion or waiting times in the centre of Banwell. If it's okay, Chairman, I'll briefly just allude to the update sheet where we've proposed a small number of changes to conditions. Most of those are relatively small changes which really have little effect, I think, on the overall control of the scheme, but they do reflect the need, I think, to reflect which plans are indicative and which have been effectively significant in determining whether the principle of this development as an outline permission would be acceptable. If necessary, I can go through those in detail, but in instance, I'll leave it. Those are relatively modest changes that we've made. There are a small number where we've proposed deletion, and those are largely because of either legitimate comments that have been made, for example, in connection with floor levels, which will be dealt with at reserved matters stage, and additional information, information such as archaeology, where we are already satisfied with what has been submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Can I call the ward member Karen Havison, please?
Chairman, forgive me, but the Solicitor Sue Buck would like to speak before you start the debate.
Okay. Sue Buck.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for interrupting, but I believe we've missed item 3, which is the declarations of disposable pecuniary interests.
Oh, boy. Ooh. Right. Shall I quickly go back and do that then?
Yes, please.
Item 3, declaration of disclosable pecuniary interests. Are there any?
No indication of any DPIs, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. In which case, Councillor Havison.
Okay, let me start by saying that I don't object to this development just because it's in my ward. I'm well aware of the pressures we're under to build more homes, especially affordable ones. I'm sure the need for those, as well as more modest ones, will increase after this pandemic. So I welcome the full quota of 30% affordable homes in this application, also the proportion of smaller homes. I even approve of relatively few parking spaces because we need to discourage car journeys in favour of cycling and public transport in the long run, as stated in the latest Department for Transport briefing by Grant Shapps. So although I recognise there are definitely positives to this application, I have some considerable concerns. The first one has already been mentioned, but I want to pick that up again because I don't feel it's been given the right setting, and that is the issue of traffic congestion through Banwell. I don't agree with the way this issue has been discussed in the application. I quote, "The latest data showing actual and predicted travelling flows for the village for the period 2001-2019 shows a 1.3% reduction in flows over this area compared to an 18% increase in flows across the North Somerset Highway network as a whole." Now, I find this statement actually very misleading because percentages only mean something when we know the starting point. Anyone who drives through Banwell knows that the problem of massive traffic jams in the village is long-standing and an everyday issue for the village. A survey measuring the length of the traffic queues given in another document proves it. That is why the discussion about a bypass goes back many decades. The fact that there has been no increase simply means that the problem was already so bad in the past that people have found rat runs to avoid it. There is no easy other route to avoid it, only rat runs. I know, because I do them myself. I know them very well. There is the one through the high street going past the doctor's surgery, which gets jammed up quite frequently. And then there's another very small rural road round the back of the hill. Any extra development will add to it, either by more rat runs or longer queues, either of them. So I feel that until the bypass is actually in place, or at least guaranteed, because it's still, as I understand it, is still conditional on all our housing proposals, we cannot add to Banwell's traffic problems. Secondly, this development is outside Banwell's village boundary, and our current policy sets a maximum of 25 homes for such developments. We all know that Banwell has, in some sort of informal agreement with the council, accepted the need for a garden village on its northern edge, but with a sort of tentative agreement that an obvious rural space remains to separate the old village from the new one. This development is in that space, opening the doors for future pressure to develop in this space. Thirdly, we are starting a journey of major consultations of our new local plan. It may well be that there will be a considerable change to our existing policies. It is also very likely that there will be massive changes in the housing market due to the current pandemic. That is why we are challenging the current government figures as a council. So I feel that although this application has clearly got some merits, it is premature in the current climate. I would ask to stick to our 25 homes limit in a location outside a village boundary such as Banwell. Once the bypass is certain and underway, we can always revisit it. But in the meantime, I would like to move that this application is refused. Thank you.
Is there a seconder?
Councillor Solomon would like to speak, Chairman.
Councillor Solomon.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Havisham, and I appreciate your concerns. However, it's well documented that we have shortfalls in our building new houses, and I think this particular scheme has quite a lot of merit. I understand the traffic problems, but Banwell I was born in this area. I spent my life going through Banwell. Banwell's always had those problems. And I really don't see the 54 houses exasperating the problem that much more. As I say, houses are well needed. It looks like a very nice development, a very sympathetic development, unlike some of the boxes that are being put up. And I would support this application. Thank you.
Hazel, any more speakers?
Yes, Councillor Payne, Chairman.
Councillor Payne.
And Councillor Crew. My little thing didn't work.
Councillor Payne first.
Hello. Can you? Yeah. Yeah. For me, this is a perfectly reasonable site for a relatively small development like this. Although it's outside of the settlement boundary, I think that boundary is quite arbitrary, and it is in fact right up against the built-up area of the village. and it's close to the facilities within the centre of the village. Of course, any development like this is likely to lead to an increase in traffic, but that would apply wherever we put it. Our communities all need new homes, and if we say a site like this is unsuitable, then we wouldn't build any new homes anywhere. So I'm in favour of this application as it stands.
Hazel, the next speaker.
That would be Councillor Crew, followed by Councillor Cherry.
Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Chairman. I just think that I'm inclined to agree with Karen, but I'd like to think of a halfway house. Anything we've done around this size in villages, we've always tended to take members on a site visit. And I think, whereas I agree with Karen, I think it's too many. We looked at it before. I still feel the compromise, from what other members are saying, is to actually defer for a site visit. I think it is important for the people of Banwell. There's 179 objections, which we need to take account of. And as Karen says, whatever you do, there is always going to be a problem with traffic. And therefore, Chairman, the middle compromises, I would propose an amendment to say deferment for a site visit.
Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that. That's Paul Gardner. Yeah.
Okay. So we are taking debate now on the amendment, a site visit, site inspection.
Councillor Cherry has asked to speak, followed by Councillor Hogg.
Councillor Cherry, are you speaking to the amendment?
Hi, sorry about that. I was actually going to just support the original application, but I can talk about the amendment.
The amendment, please do. Yeah, the amendment.
Well, I would just agree the development and abstain on the amendment, because I think it's perfectly clear that this development is a very sympathetic one, and I don't think at this point we need a site visit, because there's a lot of information already has been given. But no, so sorry, I was actually going to speak before the amendment was suggested. Okay. Yeah, so perhaps we go back to somebody who wants to talk about the amendment.
Councillor Hogg on the amendment.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to really register my support for a site visit. I think if that's seen as being appropriate in this instance, then I think I'd be in favour of it. I mean, I do know Banwell quite well. It is historically a nightmare to drive through, so I do share some of Councillor Haverson's concerns. I think what she said was that she wasn't against the development per se, but you know, as the local councillor, she's got some concerns about traffic, and I think I'd share those. So it would be good if it was possible, and I appreciate in these difficult times, logistically it may be tricky. Whether we can be given some time to go individually, that would be good, and I'd find that very useful personally. So I just wanted to say that's got my support. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other speakers?
Apologies, I thought you were talking to Michelle. Yes.
Sorry, Hazel.
That's okay. Richard Kent would like to speak, Chairman.
Richard Kent.
Chairman, yes, just on the matter of a site inspection, clearly our normal approach for any application is to ask members to go and view sites independently as best they can, and we would hope that would take place before a meeting to save further delay in the application. But as Councillor Hogg has alluded to, we are working now in very difficult times. So under current protocols, a committee site inspection in any numbers will take some arranging. We would need to look at how national guidance can be applied. I'm sure we can all stand in a field and be socially distanced, but if you think about how officers need to explain the proposals and all the rest of it, that that needs to be just thought through. So yes, it is open to the committee to hold a site inspection, but it's in these current times we'd ask that is used sparingly, and we would need some time to advise how that could be done safely under the current arrangements.
You could stagger a site inspection. So you could have so many people turn up at 11 o'clock and so many people turn up at 12 o'clock.
Chairman, yes, as I say, we would need to go away and think through the best way of doing that and make sure we are following government guideline and regulation.
Right. Hazel, any other speakers?
No other speakers, Chairman.
Chairman, if I can come back, my button for some reason didn't work into signal to speak, but just sum up on my reason for that. I think a site visit, I know times are difficult, but I'm fairly certain there's another application today which we will be agreeing a site visit as well. Just because we're in a difficult situation, we shouldn't let the public in the villages think we're bypassing their views. When people see us at a site visit, they know all members of the committee in the main have attended and are aware of the situations on the ground. And I think that is very important, however we manage it. And bear in mind, as time goes on, we're now looking into June where things will ease even more. So we're not certain what the next phase will be, but it could very well be to make site visits more easy. And I just think in readiness, I think in fairness to every other one we've done of this size, when we go out into the villages, we've always done a site visit. And in relation to that, because Anne's husband is ill this afternoon, she did have trouble getting into the meeting, but then that's overridden by waiting for the doctor because Paul is going through a rough time at the moment. So I did say to her I would support a delay and go for a deferment for a planned site visit. Thank you.
Chairman?
Who's that?
It's Richard Westwood. Very much apologies. I've had to dial in because my usually reliable broadband has let me down badly. I think the Councillor Crew makes a very good point. Previous developments of this nature have necessitated and deserved a site visit, and I believe that a site visit is what we should have for this development.
Okay, Councillor Crew has summed up. So we have a proposal for a site inspection. So I will now invite the Legal Officer Sue Buck to conduct the roll call of members.
Thank you, Chairman. For the site visit proposal, I apologise if I read some names of those that are absent. If somebody could shout out absent, that would be helpful. Councillor Peter Bryant, I know, is absent. So Councillor Cole.
Four.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry, jumped the gun.
Sorry. I will now take the vote from each councillor in alphabetical order as you explained earlier, and for each vote taken, the councillor will be confirming that they have heard the whole of the debate, unless they state otherwise. So sorry, Councillor Cole. For the site visit, was your vote?
Yeah.
Yes. Councillor Cherry.
Can I abstain on that? Or?
Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Crew.
4.
Councillor Cronolly.
4.
Councillor Gardner.
4.
Councillor Harley's absent. Councillor Havison.
4.
Councillor Hogg.
4.
Councillor Leigh Morgan. 4. Councillor Leigh Morgan. I'll come back to you. Councillor Payne.
4.
Councillor Solomon.
I'll abstain.
Councillor Westwood.
4.
Councillor Leigh Morgan, if you were in contact.
Chairman, it would appear from the list of people in the meeting that Councillor Leigh Morgan is currently not in the meeting.
Well, Chairman, the results are for the site visit is 8 councillors, 2 abstentions, 2 are absent, and obviously Councillor Leigh Morgan is absent.
Okay, so site inspection is carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 7, application 20/P/0692/NMA, application to amend the wording of several conditions attached to permission 16/P/2758/RG4 for 700 dwellings at Lockin Hedgrove, Lockin. Richard Kent.
Roger Wilmot, Chairman.
Oh, Roger Wilmot. My apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to give an introduction to this is in essence a very straightforward application, which is at committee only because it's a North Somerset application. It's actually relatively insignificant in the sense that it's been submitted as a non-material amendment, but in essence this will enable an approved development at Locking Parklands, where there is an outline planning permission, to be carried out in 2 phases, and subsequently for a reserved matters application for a short section of road to be submitted for approval. This in turn will keep the outline permission live and enable more time to form and submit reserved matters applications for the full development in the 2 phases. In terms of the update sheet, there is an adjustment to the condition. That is one to maintain the necessity for a future developer to conclude a Section 106 agreement on the site, but allows the permission to be kept alive for the purposes that I've outlined. In terms of just identifying it, thank you. The site is the red outline on this, just for identification purposes. The blue lines that you see to the running from the middle of the left-hand side to the top of the plan is the dual carriageway on the way into Weston. This is Somerset Avenue. Running from the first roundabout at the top of this site, you can probably just make that out. That is the road that leads down to Wolvers Hill Road, and at the bottom of the plan you'll see the A371 and just below that Locking Village. The 2 snakes, as it were, of red to the top and bottom of the main block of the site are the north-south link road, which is under construction and already approved under separate full application, linking up with the T-junction onto the 371 at the bottom. In essence, this is a site for which North Somerset Council will obtain planning permission, and it is the intention to market the site for developers to undertake the development of this. But it was decided for marketing purposes really that the development would be best done in 2 phases, and in essence this is what this application will facilitate to happen. I hope that's clear. Thank you.
Sorry, could I just ask why you're splitting up? What was the rationale?
Sorry. The rationale is that North Somerset Council now wishes to proceed with the delivery of this housing site. It doesn't, I think, at this stage propose to undertake the development itself, and is in the process of marketing that to potential development partners who will effectively assist with much needed housing delivery in the area. But it was considered, I think, with advice that it was probably best not done in one single phase. There are also some practical difficulties which are set out in the fact that the conditions as they stand require a variety of potentially quite complex things to be undertaken, which across the whole site would be quite significant before reserved matters could be submitted and approved, and that potentially creates a significant difficulty with the timescales left on the outline permission.
Can I remind all members to use chats if they wish to speak? Can I call the ward member, Mike Solomon?
Thank you, Chairman. I've read through this document, and it would have been clear if you read through the document that it was only asking for some very nominal changes to allow it to be built in a couple of phases. As a ward member, and speaking for my colleague Terry Porter, who's also a joint ward member, we have no objection to this at all, and I would ask that it's approved, so that we take a vote if nobody has any other objections to that.
Okay, looking for a seconder.
Councillor Connolly would like to speak, followed by Councillor Payne.
Councillor Connolly.
Yeah, I was just going to solve the seconding thing. I do support everything that Councillor Solomon said, so I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Hazel, next speaker.
No, Councillor Payne and Councillor Cherry were also going to second, but there's no further speakers on the item.
Any final comments from officers?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Solomon, do you wish to sum up?
No, thank you, Chairman. That's fine.
So we have a proposal to approve the application. So I will now invite Sue Buck to conduct the roll call of members again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, in alphabetical order, and councillors will be confirming they've heard the debate, but that was relatively short. So Councillor Bryant is still absent. Councillor Cole.
4.
Councillor Cherry.
4.
Councillor Crew.
4.
Councillor Cronolly.
4.
Councillor Gardner.
4.
Councillor Harley's absent. Councillor Havison.
4.
Councillor Hogg.
4.
Councillor Leigh Morgan. Still absent. Councillor Payne.
4.
Councillor Solomon.
4.
And Councillor Westwood.
4.
Chairman, that's 10 for officer's recommendation and 3 absent.
Right, that's clearly been approved. Thank you. Moving on to application 8, 19/P/2514/FUH, 2-storey side extension and a single-storey porch, following demolition of a lean-to domestic store at Cinderford Cottage, Ropers Lane, Rington. Simon Exley. Hello?
Chairman, if we just pause a minute whilst we just establish connection with Simon Exley.
Okay.
He appears to be in the meeting, but I'm not quite sure what's happened to his connection. Perhaps if we proceed in any event, and I'll take members through the slides, and then Councillor Hogg can speak to it.
Okay.
So, as members will see, the application site is in front of us and is outlined in red. So hopefully you can see the red outline at the bottom of the property there. The application, as you can see, is shown there as proposed, and there's a substantial chunk of development shown in that centre picture, which is the site layout, and hopefully you can see there the extent of the extension. It's difficult to describe without a pointer, but the diagrams, the drawings on the left-hand side show the extension and the relationship to the neighbour. We do have a plan of the existing arrangement, which is not very easy to follow, so I won't dwell on that. But that's a picture which shows the relationship to the neighbouring property. I'm sorry I don't have Simon's input to give you more detail and explain the proposals, but it is all set out in the report, and I'll happily answer any questions that members have on that.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have a connection with Simon at all, or do we assume he's not going to be able to speak to the application?
Chairman, can I suggest we just pause a moment and we'll just try and find out where he's got to.
Okay.
Okay.
I do see a message that says that he's unable to use his mic.
We'll just try and improvise or something a moment.
Contact with the officer.
Could I just speak while we're waiting for Simon? Would you be able to just put the plan back on the screen, Richard? Would that be possible?
Will do. We're just trying to get Simon to dial in.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor, which plan were you looking for?
Yeah, I think that's the one. So I think there's a problem with this plan, actually. So Cinderford Cottage, you've got outlined in red there. And that suggests that Cinderford is the smaller of the two properties, but I don't think that's right. I think there's a problem with that diagram. I think we probably need to have a look at that. It looks as though Greystones is a sort of dominating cottage and Cinderford is a small property, but that in actual fact is not the case. It's probably quite the reverse. So I don't know if that's something that could be looked at, or we could take an action to look at that offline, maybe.
Certainly, we will look at that.
Okay.
Just trying to get Simon actually to dial in. So please bear with us.
Okay.
You put sound on, no problem. I can hear it through here. You put sound on, no problem. All I got to do now, I've got one more thing to do a vote. They supported me on the first one, so I got to support the last one.
Councillor Crew, I think you've got your mic on at the moment, just to let you know.
Councillor Hall, while we're waiting, do you want to speak to the application, or do you wish to wait?
Well, do we know? Simon can see us, but his mic isn't working. So, shall I just say my piece? Okay. So yeah. So thank you very much. So thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues, and a very warm welcome to anybody that's watching this on YouTube. And thank you for bearing with us. It's not the normal situation, and thank you for your sort of continued patience. At our last meeting in March, members will remember that we looked at a proposed construction of a dwelling at Bucklands Lane in Nailsea. We resolved that the application be refused contrary to the recommendation of officers because, amongst a lot of other reasons, because of its size, its height, its design and proximity to the site's boundaries, we agreed it would be an incongruous feature in the street scene. Well, here we are in Rington with a very similar situation, and this time it's an extension which is right in the heart of a conservation area, and if built it would have a significant impact on surrounding neighbours, on local residents and the street scene as well. Just wanted to clarify in terms of engagement with residents. So I don't personally live near to the proposed development. I don't know either the applicant or the objectors particularly well, but I have had a couple of meetings over the course of the last few weeks as I've sort of sought to get a bit of information and insight on the proposal. I also want to point out that the neighbours most affected by the proposal, since day one, have only really been seeking compromise. So if I understand it correctly, they have not been rejecting this outright. All they've sought to do is reach a compromise and a consensus with the applicant. For example, they've suggested a single-storey construction like the one at Swallow Barn or Greystones in itself, which had a single-storey extension a few years ago. So that's in keeping with the surrounding properties and fit for later life, which I think was the key rationale for the applicant. I think it's a shame that they haven't been able to reach a consensus, and I think that's left the objectors with no alternative but to object. And I'm sure it's put a lot of stress on everybody, which I think is a bit sad. So I would like to move that we refuse this application today to build an extension at Cinderford Cottage. Before I explain why, I'm hoping that members have had a chance to have a look at the material that's been sent about the application, including the set of before and after images that were circulated. I'll position my views about the application, but it would be really good if we could hear the views of members. I mean, it's such a artificial committee meeting this that, after I've spoken, I would really like to hear from as many of the members that are still connected as possible to get a sense of if you agree with me about this. I think we could, there are potentially there's some justification for a site visit if people can't be on the same page as me with this. But given where we are with this pandemic, I think it would be much more helpful to process and also to the applicant if we were able to make the judgment based on what we've got before us today. So I'm just going to walk through the officer's report, and Simon may be able to sort of respond to some of these points in due course, but there are quite a few inaccuracies actually on the officer's report, and I've already indicated there seems to be an inaccuracy on the map. So I want to go through those in a bit of detail. So first of all, the report says that Cinderford Cottage, the applicant's cottage, adjoins the neighbour at Greystones along the rear, so the two properties are back to back. Actually, the two cottages form an L shape. Cinderford Cottage lies to the left-hand side of Greystones, and that basically means that the rear of the proposed extension to Cinderford Cottage will directly face and be seen from Roper's Lane, and it will loom over the garden of Greystones. And you'll see that on one of the images that we, the after images that was before and after images that were sent yesterday. The report informs us that the gradient of the site falls towards the south, so the height of the buildings appears lower from Roper's Lane. Now that's quite a misleading statement actually. The reality is that both Greystone and Cinderford Cottage are built on the same elevation. If you stand on Roper's Lane, the roof line and windows are at the same height. So because Cinderford Cottage is effectively built up to a similar roof line at Greystones, the effect of the gradient at the rear makes the impact on Swallow Barn significantly worse than it would be if the gradient did exist. So, the officer's report suggests that it's a kind of gradient-induced mitigation from the street, but the reality is it's a gradient-induced impact at the rear of the property because it just, it's so much bigger and foreboding than it would be without the gradient. The officer's report goes on to say that from Roper's Lane, dwellings are fronted by natural stone walls and landscaping. These important boundary features contribute to the pleasant rural aesthetic, but they also obscure views. But this isn't the case. On Roper's Lane, there's an ancient bridleway dead opposite that runs north next to a Grade 2 listed Georgian-style Gothic cottage. We know it locally as the Roundhouse. The wall of Greystones, which I think probably is about 4 foot height, doesn't obscure the views at all. There's beautiful views of the Mendips from that listed cottage, and for the hundreds of walkers, including me, that walk down that bridleway every day. Once this house is built, once this extension's built, a big chunk of that view of the Mendips is going to disappear forever. The officer's report argues that the proposal would not unacceptably harm the characteristics and appearance of the existing dwelling or the character and appearance of the surroundings. But that really is stretching it. The view from Swallow Barn, and for other neighbouring properties as well, but the view from Swallow Barn is right across this conservation area. And I want to just pause for a moment. And this is a conservation area here in the heart of Rington. And that view is going to be totally obliterated and replaced with a featureless rendered sidewall of this proposed extension. And if you're wondering about dimensions, we're talking about something like 7 meters in height and 7 meters in length, and made worse, as I've said, by the lower elevation at the back. The architect's drawings also miss off the chimney that's on the single-storey Swallow Barn, which is in constant use and actually lower in height than the Velux windows on the proposed development. And the view from south from Roper's Lane and the Garden of Greystones will be blocked out by, a featureless 2-storey high wall to the rear of the extension. So it's just not appropriate. And if you look at the images, the before and after images, you'll see the difference without that development and with it. Again, the report tells us the proposal doesn't affect the setting of Roper's Lodge, which is a Grade 2 listed building, but I think it really does. So Roper's Lodge, if it's the same building I'm thinking of, is the beautiful and tiny little Gothic lodge just opposite, built in the 1830s. It's got a unique semicircular eastern end with 2 lovely big windows that look directly across at Greystones, and for the last 200 years have enjoyed that glimpse of the Mendips. So I'm arguing that the setting of Roper's Lodge will be affected by the proposal. It'll draw a big stone curtain right across the view. It's going to harm the amenity value for residents here and at Greystones and Swallow Barn, not to mention local walkers and other residents in Roper's Lane. I'm really worried, genuinely, about the impact it's going to have on the mental health of those around it. In particular, not only, but in particular, the residents of Greystones. If you see the photograph, which shows the garden of Greystones, what you can't see very well is the fact that that garden is probably about 30 foot by 20 foot in size. Cinderford Cottage has already had a large house built at the front of Greystones. So the very front of Greystones is the new house that that Cinderford had built, and now this proposal is going to put a significant building on the other side. So you know the residents at Greystones are going to be surrounded on 3 sides, and I just feel that's unacceptable. I mean, one of the striking things as well in all the email correspondences I had with officers, the planning officer stated to me that when considering an application, we need to consider whether it's bad enough to refuse rather than good enough to approve. So we're talking about a conservation area here, and officers are saying to me that we need to consider whether it's bad enough to refuse. I feel that we have to do much better than that. In a conservation area, the quality of the development should enhance and improve on the local area. Officers have got a duty to pay regard to bulk, height, vertical and horizontal emphasis and design, not simply shrug and say it ain't bad enough to refuse. In any case, I think that really was quoting from NPPF's section 2 on sustainable development, which relates more to the building of houses than it does to extensions. I also note in a letter of correspondence that the architect indicated that if this proposal was refused today, the applicant will take it all the way to appeal and push for North Somerset Council to pick up the costs. But I'd like to remind him, and I'd like to remind members, that according to Trevor Roberts Associates, who ran a workshop for new councillors like me about a year ago, advised that considered decisions properly defended will not result in cost awards. So, you know, in her letter, the applicant says that her rationale for this project was to sensitively extend the cottage. Nobody is arguing with that. I really don't want to stop her from extending her cottage. And I think that the neighbours around her don't want her to do that either. That's precisely what we want her to do. But in making it this enormous 2-storey extension, I think it's just, you know, right in the heart of the conservation area. I just think it's unacceptable. So to sum up, Chair, I appreciate you bearing with me. I'd like to move that we refuse the application to build an extension at Cinderford Cottage for the following reasons. The proposed development, by virtue of its siting, height, scale, and its proximity to the site's boundaries, would have an adverse impact on the living conditions of neighbouring residents at Swallow Barn and Greystones by reason of an overbearing impact, including a tunnelling effect on the dining room and rear patio. The proposal is therefore contrary to policies DM32 and DM38 of the North Somerset Sites and Policies Plan Part 1 and the North Somerset Residential Design Guide, SPD, Section 1, Protecting Living Conditions of Neighbours, and also contrary to policy DM3, which deals with conservation areas in so much as the proposal fails to ensure that the development will not cause harm to the existing character and will seek to positively enhance it. As a reminder, the officer advised in the email that the application wasn't bad enough to refuse, and both of those statements can't be true. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I'm looking for a seconder, but meantime, Richard, any comments before I ask members to come in?
Chairman, thank you. I have one comment, and then can we try and introduce Simon Exley again? He is on a speakerphone, but hopefully the sound quality will be good enough. He can see and hear what's being said, but he can't speak himself. The only point I'd want to make before passing over to Simon is that we have to be extremely cautious about relying on material that's come from third parties that isn't formally part of the application process, and that's because there's no guarantee that representations that have been made are accurate. The photographic representations and montages are a very skilled thing to get right, even through specialists, and we would urge you to give those very little weight in this particular instance. They can be extremely difficult things to get accurate. But on that note, if we can just pass over to Simon and see how we get on with him. Simon.
Okay. Oh dear.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Try again, Simon. No, we can't. Sorry, it's the sound is no good.
Sorry, Richard.
Try again. Try again.
Yeah. Hello.
Yes, that's better.
No, it's not.
No.
No, sorry, the connection is not good enough, Chairman. I don't know. Simon's obviously got a bad connection at the minute.
Okay. Hazel.
Yes. So Councillor Gardner has seconded the motion, but Councillor Solomon and Councillor Payne would like to speak.
Right.
Simon.
Councillor Gardner, do you wish to comment besides seconding?
No, thanks for the opportunity, Andy, but no, I think Steve summed it up perfectly. I just agree with everything he said, so thank you.
Okay. Councillor Solomon.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First off, I think there was talk of a call for a site visit on this one. I don't think, from my point of view, a site visit would be necessary, because I would tend to support Councillor Hogg in as much as this is a very, very large extension. There could have been compromise there with the neighbours. It sounds to me, and reading the documentation, that there was no real discussion and compromise with the neighbours. And the only way we can force that compromise, I believe, is to refuse this application. So they then talk to the neighbours, decide on what would be acceptable, and put the application in again. So I would support Steve Hogg on this one.
Hazel, was the next speaker Councillor Payne?
Yes, it was, Chairman.
Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, actually, I would prefer to have a site visit on this one. I agree that there appear to be some concerns with it. The size of the extension is significant, which is very likely to alter the character of the cottage within the conservation area. I'm also concerned about the design, particularly the east elevation, which shows that blank featureless wall. But it's really difficult for me to make an informed judgment on this without actually going there and having a look at it. Particularly with the fact that it's been suggested that the plans we've got have got anomalies in them. So I would like to propose as an amendment that we do have a site visit on this one.
I'd support that.
Can you, whoever it was, come in via chats?
I can't, unfortunately, because I'm dialing in.
Okay.
It's
Westwood.
Richard Westwood, sorry.
So that's seconded.
That's seconded by me, yeah.
Okay, so any comments via chats on the amendment only?
Not on the amendment, but prior to that, Councillor Cherry had asked to speak, and I believe Richard Kent has Simon Exley on a different line now.
Okay. Councillor Cherry, do you wish to comment on the amendment?
Yes, I agree. I think we should have we should have a site visit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can we go to Simon Exley now?
Hello, Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes.
Good. I apologise that the microphone wasn't working. I've heard all the debate, and what was happening, I can explain that in terms of the extension, we considered it in the light of the council's design guides, and we considered it satisfies the impact on the adjoining neighbours in accordance with our guidelines. In terms of the impact on the conservation area, the council's conservation officer is happy with the design, and the national requirement is that the development should either preserve or enhance the conservation area. And in this particular case, whilst Councillor Hogg is saying that the development should only enhance the conservation area, we consider it preserves it, which is sufficient to meet the national requirements. Obviously, I understand from all of the comments that Councillor Hogg has made and the neighbours, the impact on them, these have been fully considered, and that the proposed plan does show details of how the impacts on the adjoining properties have been measured. Richard, if you can go to the slide of the proposals.
Will do.
We're just waiting for that to load. Sorry. If members look at the two drawings on the right-hand side, sorry, on the left-hand side of the screen, there are dotted lines which are the distances taken at 45-degree angles from the adjoining windows in Swallow Barn and Greystones, and those show that the proposed extensions do not impact on the 45-degree line. The 45-degree line comes from the council's adopted residential design guide, and that establishes that if a building goes within 45 degrees of habitable room windows, then we would refuse it because it would result in a loss of light and outlook for the occupiers of those properties. In this case, the extension is not within those areas, and therefore, under the council's residential design guide, we consider the impact on the neighbours is acceptable, and it wouldn't result in unacceptable overbearing impact on the neighbours and their outlook and loss of light. In terms of the photographs that Councillor Hogg circulated, members can see the images that we haven't verified of the extension, but it shows that in terms of the impact from Roper's Lane, that would still be views to the south and across to the Mendip Hills, and that elevation would be in stonework and wouldn't be rendered, and that would be in keeping with the stonework seen from Roper's Lane. The right-hand wall of the extension, which adjoins Swallow Barn, would be rendered, but that wouldn't be widely seen from the conservation area. In terms of the last comment that Councillor Hogg, the second speaker in their comments made comments that were circulated to members. The officers didn't have sight of those comments and were unaware of the concerns that was raised about the misleading report. In terms of the impacts, as I've said, they have been fully considered and meet the council's guidance. Whilst Councillor Hogg referred to an appeal, this type of appeal would be a fast track appeal and would be based on the council's decision, and we would have no ability to submit any statement in support of a refusal. It would be very difficult to demonstrate if an application complies with the council's policies on impact on neighbours, that it fails that and would have an adverse effect on the neighbours. I hope that assists, Chairman.
Thank you. Hazel.
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Hogg, followed by Councillor Cronolly, would like to speak.
Thank you,
Councillor
Simon.
Hogg.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Simon, for the. Glad you managed to get connected. I think in so much as the planning process is about probity and scrutiny.
Councillor Hogg, can I just butt in? We're talking on the amendment only.
Yeah.
Which is still on the table.
All right, fine. What, the amendment for a site visit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chairman,
Fine.
can I speak, please? This is Richard Westwood.
I'll bring you in next, Richard.
Thank you.
Fine. No, I was just going to respond to Simon, given the fact that Simon wasn't able to speak before my piece. So it would be normal for Simon to go through the application, and it would be usual for the member to respond afterwards, wouldn't it? So all I really wanted to say was that in so much as that it's about probity and scrutiny, that I would support the amendment for a site visit. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I in seconding the amendment, I think the having looked at the materials, supporting materials, particularly the photographs with the before and after, they are quite powerful. And going back to what, or apparently quite powerful, going back to what Richard Kent said. I think that really what we're looking at is the effect on the view in the landscape, the 200-year-old view from the lane for somebody walking along there, as it were. And I think that in fairness to the applicant and to the objectors, we should go and have a look at this. So that's why I think we should have a site meeting.
Councillor Connolly.
Cheers, thank you. So my only worry about all of this is with the unverified pictures and kind of the accuracy of those and the accuracy of the plans. If a site visit goes ahead, that's fine. I would support that, but I'd be concerned that those other things aren't looked into. Are the things that we've been presented with accurate? Because there's no point doing a site visit if we're also going to rely on the documents that may or may not be accurate. So I'll support the site visit, but just a reminder to members really that we potentially do have some unverified pictures that the accuracy of which needs to be checked.
Thank you. Before I invite Councillor Payne to sum up, Hazel, any more comments?
Richard Kent has asked to speak again.
Yep. Okay. Richard.
Chairman, yes. If I may, just in response to the practicalities of a site inspection. I mentioned it earlier about some of the issues we'd face going to visit a greenfield site, but I just ought to underline that under current guidelines, that visiting a private house would be extremely difficult to arrange. So it may take some time and some need to wait for lifting of the current lockdown arrangements. But we would, if members want to carry out a site inspection, you'd need to leave it to us to work out how that could best be done with the applicant and when that could be done to meet government guidelines.
Councillor Payne, do you wish to sum up?
No, not really, Chairman. I just think we should have a site visit so that we can clear up some of these anomalies which we can't really look at without visiting the site.
Okay, we have a proposal for a site inspection. Sue Buck, roll call of members, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Taking the vote in alphabetical order, and for each vote taken, the councillor will be confirming they've heard the whole of the debate. The proposal is for a site inspection. So when you say for, that's for the site inspection. Councillor Peter Bryant is absent. Councillor Cole?
For.
Councillor Cherry?
For.
Councillor Crew?
For.
Councillor Cronolly?
For.
Councillor Gardner?
4.
Councillor Harley's absent. Councillor Haverson.
4.
Councillor Hogg.
4.
Councillor Leigh Morgan.
Unfortunately, I've been shut out of the meeting for the last hour, so I can't vote.
Thank you. Councillor Payne.
4.
Councillor Solomon.
4.
Councillor Westwood.
4.
Chairman, that's 10 for the site visit, 2 absent and 1 marked as abstaining.
That's clearly carried. Thank you. Item 9.
Chairman, if I may, we'll obviously liaise with the applicant and yourselves and guidelines and work out how best that can be done.
Okay. Item 9, Plan and Appeals. Richard Kent.
Nothing to add to the report, Chairman.
Any comments from members?
Nothing received, Chairman.
Chairman,
Okay.
speak through. Speak through.
Peter.
Just to say, congratulations, Chairman. I don't recall any meeting that's ever been where we've had no votes against any application. Whatever we decided was carried totally.
Okay. Item 9 is just for noting. Item 10, emergency delegation arrangements. Richard Kent.
Chairman, thank you. As you'll have seen from the report, government is encouraging councils to very much carry on with business as usual in the planning system and making planning decisions, but and recognises that planning committees in particular are quite challenging in this particular situation. So one of the things we do talk about is looking at how you can streamline your planning committee process, and we've been doing that today, and this is our first go, and we'll be better next time. But the new regulations to enable virtual committees to take place are now in place. But part of the guidance, as well as reducing committee membership if you can, is about managing the business to make the meetings more manageable in themselves. So a lot of the guidance is about ensuring that committee time is focused on the most significant and finely balanced applications. And so one of the recommendations that councils do look at reviewing their delegation arrangements during the current pandemic. So to that end, as hopefully members have seen, the recommendation is that for 6 months, the committee temporarily suspends the automatic triggers which require certain sorts of applications to come to committee. And those are set out in the appendices, but it's basically automatic referral for certain councillor officer and council applications, as well as some major applications and those which are departures from policy. So the purpose of this being that the referral mechanism for councillors to still refer applications to committee if they're contentious will still be in place. But where they're not contentious, like the one we had for Locking Parklands earlier, that needn't come, and we can the meeting can be spent on things which need more member attention. Similarly, to try and keep the committee focused on the most controversial cases, the ask is that where members do have a call-in proposal, they do work with the officers to try and resolve that outside of bringing to committee, and they do use their call-in powers selectively. So, Chairman, the proposal is to amend the delegation arrangement for 6 months as set out in Appendix 3. Thank you.
Well, from the chair, I'm more than happy to move officer's recommendation. So I hope I get a seconder.
Yes.
Second that, Chairman.
Yep.
Okay. So any other comments from members via chats?
Yes, Councillor Gardner has asked to speak, Chairman.
Councillor Gardner.
Oh, thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting experience to have a first virtual meeting, but I think it's gone pretty well. There's been a few gremlins. I guess I was wondering why we needed to change, because the meetings work pretty well. I fully support a collaborative, working with officers, but that's already part of the process. And I guess I was a little perturbed when I saw there's some language in there. Maybe I misread it wrongly, but it seemed that officers and the chair would have the final decision rather than a member if there was a contentious application that needed to be in. So I suppose I had two questions. Do we actually need to change anything because it's all working? And secondly, could someone confirm, you know, at the end of the day, if it is contentious, that the member will have the final say?
Chairman, if I may, there's not an intention that the chairman has a right of veto, although that is the case with some councils. What we're asking is that it's the current good practice continues, so that where councillors do have concerns about relatively small scale applications, that they do talk to the officers, and if needs be, we can involve the chairman to try and work through what the issues are. It's not an attempt to keep local members out of the discussion by any stretch of the imagination, probably to the contrary. And as I said in my opening words, members can still refer applications to committee if that's what they want. But the spirit of the guidelines, both long-standing and current, is that really committee time should be focused on the most complex and controversial applications. And this meeting has gone relatively well at the first attempt. If we had a longer agenda with relatively small-scale cases, then that is probably not a good use of committee time necessarily, and certainly would test the current operating arrangements. But as I say, members can still refer any application they want to committee. The purpose of the change is to simply remove the triggers for uncontroversial cases, such as the locking parklands we had earlier.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Hazel, anyone else wishing to speak?
Yes, Councillor Cherry would like to speak, followed by Councillor Payne.
Councillor Cherry.
Hello. I would agree with what Paul Gardner mentioned, which is that we all want to make everything work. We want to work to make sure that we get sufficient scrutiny. The reality is that there isn't the need for this change, and I don't like the wording. I mean, it says that it can only be called in if it's absolutely essential in the public interest for the decision to be made in public. And there are also several other amendments within the draft which I don't understand. So, for example, instead of having 10 letters of complaint, you now have to have 50 letters of complaint. That's a material change, and I don't think many of the other councillors are actually aware of these changes. And it shouldn't just come before the planning committee, because it's actually about democratic accountability and, in fact, good governance. And if we want transparency and we want to be seen to be working with the public, I don't think these rushed guidelines are a good idea. So I would strongly suggest that we have another think, look at them with leisure, and then decide how they should go. Because at the moment we're all trying to work with the planning officers. Somebody's got their microphone on. It's not me. Anyway, so I don't think they're terribly helpful, and I think we need to have a bit more time to look at this. But I would suggest that we shouldn't accept them at all at this point, because we still want to help the officers, but they're not needed effectively, like Paul Gardner said as well. Thank you.
Councillor Payne.
Yes, I just wanted to say about the reduction of the number to 13. I think that this is something that we can consider to be made a permanent feature, because I think that the number of 27 that we normally have is particularly unwieldy and is rather unusual when compared to other authorities.
Hazel, any other comments?
Chairman, can I say something? It's Richard Westwood,
yes,
and I do apologise for not being able to indicate that I want to speak.
Okay.
Yeah, just trying to tease this one through a little bit. If we were to keep things as they are, because I think that long-standing practice, because I think that this planning committee, even with 27 members, is reasonably efficient, and we don't get that many applications in front of us per meeting. We have a reasonably slim agenda for most meetings. What concerns me with this is that if the public get a whiff that we are curtailing scrutiny because of the coronavirus emergency at the moment, if they get a whiff that we're curtailing scrutiny, then we will get all kinds of ongoing problems purely from that. I'm thinking of a controversial or supposedly controversial application in Clevedon, which we will be dealing with within the next few months. And I would hate to have a cloud passed over our judgment because people can say that we'd curtailed scrutiny and were hushing things up or pushing things through. And unfortunately, they will, given half a chance. So just, is it possible to leave things as they are with our long-standing and quite effective means of keeping our agenda reasonably slim?
Richard.
Chairman, we're always looking to keep agendas slim, and one of the reasons they are slim is because we do work with local members to try and resolve their issues with applicants and objectors where we can. There is no attempt here to subvert openness or transparency. As the report said, the members still retain the full right to refer an application to committee, and all we're simply trying to do is to streamline the process so that those which aren't controversial don't have to come regardless and take up valuable committee time. In terms of the point Councillor Cherry made about the public interest point, that is only an advisory. It's a request. It's not a rule. It's not something that that's enforceable in that sense. It's simply a message that if we can deal with it at delegated level, let's do so. But if the ward councillor is like Councillor Hogg with his Rington case still wants committee scrutiny, then that is perfectly legitimate and reasonable. What we're trying to do though is to avoid committee time being spent on fairly simple stuff which is otherwise not controversial.
Hazel, any more comments?
Yes, Councillor Gardner has asked to speak again.
Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah, if I could just build on what Caroline and Richard's saying there, I think everyone's got the same intent, but also I think the way that the amendments are written, it could easily be seen by the member of the public as they were kind of curtailing the opportunity for public representation. So I would propose that we actually form a small working group where we look at the other issues like what's the optimum number of people on the committee, how do we make it, how do we engage most effectively with with our residents, and how do we actually make the process as streamlined as possible. So I think we should come at it from a different angle and change the language so it's much more resident friendly. So that would be my proposal.
Hazel, anybody else?
Yes, Councillor Cherry has asked to speak again.
Councillor Cherry.
Hi, I think that's a really good idea, which Paul's just proposed, because we can then make sure that the committee works really well and we're working with the officers, and it's just that it's the language in the guidelines, and at the moment, because people in this COVID pandemic are concerned about transparency, especially because we're not having public meetings. It's vital that we try and make sure that the public come along with us, and we're seen to be listening to people,
Richard
listening
Westwood
to community.
Is
Okay,
now
thank
exiting.
So I think that's it, just bringing along the community. And in this area, in Clevedon, we have several matters, just as Richard mentioned. Anyway, thank you.
Okay. Hazel, anybody else?
No further requests to speak, Chairman.
So, Richard, any more comments from you, or are you done?
No, Chairman, I've got nothing to add. The intention is very well meaning, and it's not an attempt to undermine members' powers in any shape or form.
Okay, we have a proposal to move officers' recommendation. Sue Buck, roll call, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In alphabetical order, and for each vote, the councillor will be confirming they have heard the whole of the debate, unless they state otherwise. Moving officers' proposal, Councillor Peter Bryant is absent. Councillor Cole.
4.
Councillor Cherry. Councillor Cherry.
Sorry, I'm against. I thought we was looking at the other proposal for a meeting instead. No, I'm against the as it stands. Thank you.
Councillor Crew. Councillor Crew.
4.
Councillor Cronolly.
4.
Councillor Gardner.
Against.
Councillor Hall is absent. Councillor Havison.
Against.
Councillor Hogg.
Against.
Councillor Leigh Morgan.
4.
Councillor Payne.
Richard
4.
Westwood.
Is now joining.
Councillor Mike Solomon. Councillor Solomon. Councillor Westwood. Councillor Westwood.
I'm going to have to abstain on this because I was out of the meeting inadvertently for 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Westwood. Can I just go back to Councillor Solomon?
He's no longer on the meeting. He seems to have gone.
All right, thank you. Chairman, we have 5 for, 4 against, 2 abstaining and 2 absent.
So that's been carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 11. There is no urgent business. So can I thank you all very much? And can I ask everyone to hang up immediately? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Chairman. Richard Westwood.
Is now exiting.